think this time I'm gonna do a good job with the video taking. Round 3. Ian and Volko. I know you love it. Oh, I take the lead for the first time. What's up, broskies? You know that this was a turning point in the whole series of the competition. For sure it was. Me catching a fish. Look at that. So let me remind you, for the ones that didn't watch, the first two the first two series in this competition between me and Ian, he beat me the first time 4.5 points, I believe, to 0, and then the second the same, or was one of the times 4 points to 0, I don't know, but it was always to 0, and he would always catch 4 or more fish. And there's something wrong with that picture. There's something very wrong with that picture. I think if you have any common sense, and if you've seen any of my videos, and if you just hear me how I speak, like my confidence level, you would almost have to assume that those were fluke days. Those were days when you wouldn't bet on, you know? Like if I show up anywhere where there's fish with my fly rod and a gear rod and a twitching rod, and if you bet against me catching fish, you'll probably lose that bet. I'll bet you against that like 10 times out of 10. Like if there's a bet that I'm not gonna catch fish, and of course that day when we had the competition, I caught a bunch of fish, you know, before and after the competition. It's like I basically never skunk. But to be fair, this was some kind of period of time, basically about an hour each time for the first 2 competitions. So it happens to everybody, but it doesn't happen to me when somebody else is catching and for me not to catch. That means the fish are biting and I'm not catching. That's some crazy stuff. That is a fluke day. In any case, this is not to take away from Ian. He actually knows what's up. Not quite on my level, but that does come with, I don't know, he's young, but he's up there. He can definitely challenge me. I'm not saying that he can't beat me, but I am saying that there has to be some kind of fluke for him to beat me at this point, for sure. Like if I have all my flies, whatever we're doing, whether it's gear or jigging or fly fishing, if I have my full setup with me, like I didn't have in the days where I competed with him, and I didn't do what I would do if I were serious, which is change up a bunch of angles and a bunch of flies, basically where I was sitting, and even where I caught the fish, this fish right now is my least favorite spot on this run. Like I actually would never sit there. Ian was at the hot spot, which is the tail out, like we know. Tail out's coho, fly fishing, you know, makes sense. But again, no excuses. Yeah, you know, I definitely give those victories to him. But things are about to change here now. I don't want to say too much. But you can see me float fishing while he's fly fishing still. We're still doing this thing. And yeah, look at all those fish. It's going a little too slow, so. But I bet if I stayed there for a little while longer, I would make one of these fish bite that roll. In any case, the competition was more important, even though this whole thing kind of sucked. That's why I'm kind of narrating this whole thing, so that it's a little bit more entertaining and engaging, maybe, with a story of some kind. Otherwise, the way I want to do this is have a little more interaction between the competitors have cameras on all the rest of the competitors, so that when it gets edited, it's kind of more fun, more engaging, and you can see the first-person experience from everybody that's competing. So this is a bit still rough around the edges and not at all the way I imagine it, but I've seen way more boring stuff online getting more interest even, so yeah, I feel like you can still enjoy it and also learn. This is the next spot. This is the first time we've changed spots. We still competed for about maybe 2 hours this one time. This is probably our longest session. He did miss a fish, if you noticed, while I was speaking up there. So a missed fish is 1 point, half a point when we see that it's on the mouth, and you know, a caught fish is a point. So right now I have 1 point, he has half a point. And now we're down next to down to the next spot. We are trying to keep it somewhat fair. And to my comment about where he was up on the other spot at the tail out, now on this spot I'm at the tail out of the run, and I'm gonna fish it for a little while, and then he's gonna fish it for a little while. Yes, these are all things that matter, because as you know, the angles are very important, and the holes in which the fish sit are very important, and the way you drift is important, and so many things that are important. And it is true that sometimes when I'm at the wrong spot of the run, even if I'm overfished, those may be not active fish, maybe I'm not going down to them well enough with my presentation because of the angle or something. Point is, on any given run, even if you're jigging or float fishing, there are the hit spots where you would prefer, or I would prefer to run my presentation. And it's not a super crazy secret what those spots are, and those are basically the tailouts most of the time. So in order to make it fair, you know, I suppose you gotta have a certain time that the one person fishes that one particular spot, if we're fishing the same run, particular spot like the tail out, and then we switch up places. And you would argue that, you know, whoever gets the first shot at the tail out or the preferred spot has greater odds. So all these are things that we must consider when we give our final score of the whole matchup. Right now I've loaded my fly to go pretty low, pretty fast. Obviously I'm on a full sink, and Ian is on a sink tip. I am going low and slow in this retrieve because it's quite deep actually at the further end, at the high bank, and that's what I'm banking on, is drop down lower to where those fish actually are. And you wouldn't even be able to tell how deep it is if you didn't go on the opposite side of the high bank, which is what we did, and we saw where the fish are, and we came back to this side, and boom, that helped us see how deep it is there, so that we know what to do with our setups in terms of how heavy the fly should be, how fast or slow we should retrieve in order to stay in the strike zone. So yeah, that's an important one, knowing your depth and knowing where these fish sit. We're gonna count this as a point to the good. So now I've got 2 points, and Ian has got half a point. A much better, much more realistic outcome of today's competition. I'm gonna make a few more casts in here, and then I'm gonna switch up spots with Ian, but I'll switch up the footage to where I've switched spots with him, because I didn't get any more on my other few casts. So as you know, the one spot you fish changes with the level and the clarity of the water. So then your tactics change. Sometimes the same spot will not hold fish, or will hold it in completely different spots. And sometimes the fish will be at exactly the same spot, but it will be either slightly higher, slightly lower, slightly murkier water, etc., etc. Why I'm saying this is, interestingly enough, if the water was down just another foot, I wouldn't have been where I'm at. I wouldn't have been on this side at all. I would have been at the tail out of the far side, the high bank side, and I would be casting sort of upstream. And I've done that when it's just right, and I love it. It's just obviously quite bushy up at the high bank, and it's a little more difficult, so people wouldn't do it as much. But if you get good and if you find your spot right at that tail out, see the high bank, you can really improve your chances, because you improve your angle and you improve the angle of your retrieve. And as you know, I really like to sneak behind those fish and cast upstream. This is basically probably my most secret weapon, or something that I do that I don't see others do, that really sets me apart in the way I fish, whether it's jigging, fly fishing, or even float fishing. I guess those are basically the comments that I have in terms of the competition so far and these videos that I've taken so far. I win this one. We did move to another spot where Ian caught one, so in the end it was 2 points to 1.5 points. The margin of win was small, but I take it. It is a win, and it's a deserved one. So on to part 3. There is a part 3.